A History of Southern Missouri and Northern Arkansas by William Monks, published in 1907. Rescuing Union Families, number 34. In the fall of 1862, some of the Union men whose families were still residing in Ozark and Howell counties went to the federal posts and were promised arms and ammunition in order to return and try to get their families out, as it had become almost impossible for the families to get through alone, on account of being robbed. About 50 of them procured arms and started for Howell County from the outpost of the federal authorities. They marched at night and lay by in the day, and on reaching the western part of Howell County, informed their families to get ready to move, still keeping themselves in hiding. About 20 families prepared for moving and had assembled on the bayou near where Friend's old mill was located. Just about the time they were ready to start, a bunch of rebels came up and opened fire on them. They returned the fire and held the rebels at a distance while they moved all their wagons up close together and started in the direction of Ozark County. One of the men who had come to assist in the escort became excited upon the first fire from the rebels and ran, never stopping until he reached the federal lines. The remainder of the men bravely repelled the rebels while their families kept their teams steadily moving. On reaching the big north fork of White River, and while the families in their wagons were in midstream, the rebels reached the bluff and opened fire on them. The Union men vigorously returned the fire. They all reached the opposite side of the river without one of their number being killed. Some of the women and children had received slight wounds, but nothing serious. The rebels still continued to fire upon them until they reached the northern part of Ozark County, when further pursuit was abandoned, and about 20 families were enabled to reach the federal lines. In a short time, the Union men attempted to again reach their homes for the purpose of helping destitute families to get out. They traveled only at night, keeping themselves concealed in daytime. In this way, they reached Fulton County, Arkansas, when the rebels found out that some of the Union men were in the country. The rebel forces at once became so strong that the Federals had to retreat without getting any of their families, passing back through the western part of Howell County over into Ozark and went into camp on the head of Lick Creek. Shortly after they got into camp, the rebels slipped up on them and opened fire, mortally wounding a man named Fox and slightly wounding several others. They had to scatter at once to avoid being captured, and when they reached the federal lines, they were almost worn out. At this time, all of the federal posts had numbers of refugee families stationed near them, entirely destitute of food and raiment, and relying entirely for their preservation upon the small amount of help they received from the government.